our next agenda item, Jess Adal from Pastor Associates with his associates will present to the Town Board a senior housing market study for a Publishers Parkway proposed development.
Typically, we pass out these 11 by 17 packets. I just want to make sure it's not breaking any COVID rules.
Good catch, John. I got them all.
One of the dead cats from the line. Okay.
Good shot. Go. Thank you.
All right, are we ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, thank you. Good evening. My name is Jess Sudol, civil engineer with Pastor Associates. Here with me this evening is Carl Schuler, on behalf of Union Crossing Development as the applicant, and also Matt Newcomb, a project manager from our office at Pastor Associates. We appeared before this board months ago, several months ago now. I think it might have actually even been before COVID, to introduce a revision or a change to a previously approved senior housing project on the southwest corner of Publishers Parkway and Hard Road. At that time, there were some concerns, and this board felt that it would be appropriate for us to visit the planning board before coming back to continue discussions with this board. Actually, remember the planning board meeting specifically because it was the first in-person planning board meeting I had done in several months. But we did appear before that board to present the project, and they had some questions and concerns which we have since responded to, and I'll get into those in a moment. But just to give some of the history, this project, this entire 30 acres or so, was originally approved as a senior housing project with 4-unit townhome buildings and a central 3-story multifamily building back in 2013. At about the same time, for those of you familiar with the development in this area, there were several other projects going on, notably Marquise at the Woods, which is further up Hard Road on the east side, also the Winding Creek Woods project, which the first phase of development there recently was completed. Conifer also had a project at the old golf tee project that they built. So there was a lot happening, and as a result, the developer and applicant at that time did not move forward with construction of this plan. For those of you in your packet, there's a plan there that's got kind of this red-pink shading in the lower right-hand corner. That is the original plan that received all approvals, again, back in 2013, 2014. Since then, obviously 6-7 years have passed, and, the market has really stabilized. One of the things that was asked of us was to provide a market study, which we have provided, and Carl and myself are happy to speak to that in detail as we get further on into this evening. But what I wanted to point out was essentially the change that was made back from the original approved plan to where we are this evening. Essentially, these 6 acres were cut off and sold to, I believe it was U of R, who built about a 10,000 square foot office building right off of Hard Road. And that left us about 25 acres here in the back. What we did was we took that 25 acres and we went from 210 units to 194 units. And the reason why we ended up at 194 is because if you look at the area that was cut off and the number of units that were eliminated on that land, it was approximately 16 units. So, we didn't try to take all 210 and cram them into the remaining 25 acres. We recognize that with selling off some land, there would be a reduction in density. So on the 25 acres, we are proposing the same number of units that was previously approved on those 25 acres once you kind of cut off that eastern section. But we did make a rather significant change in decreasing the development footprint and vastly increasing the amount of green space and the amount of buffering. There's a bunch of line of sight studies that we've submitted to show how that's been an improvement. But really 2 areas we wanted to focus on were down here along Route 104. As you're going down 104, you know that the town over the years has done a really good job of maintaining that buffer. It's not a highway that has development and trees cleared that you can see. out to the north. It's really a good buffer the entire way, and we thought it was important to maintain that. Frankly, back in 2013, 2014, that was a big topic of discussion. We actually did a tree survey. But we've increased that buffer pretty substantially. And if you really look at them side by side, you can see how we have all these buildings down here that have all been pulled up into the more centralized cluster development area. What it also allowed us to do with our change is, if you see the previously approved plan, we have these two townhome buildings that are relatively close to Publishers Parkway. So if it had been built as approved back then, when you were going down Publishers Parkway, you'd be looking at the back of those two buildings. With our revised plan, we were able to remove those buildings, so they're no longer there. That creates a significant amount of more green space and separation and setback from Publishers Parkway till you get to our first building over here on this plan. And all those buildings are also lined up on the long end, so you're not looking at one long, I don't want to say ugly vinyl siding, but the back of the building. You're looking at, really the clubhouse and the main entrance, which is really going to be, one of the most aesthetically pleasing parts of the project. We, of course, were able to, how do you accomplish that and maintain the same density? Well, we did that by taking this three-story building area where we used to be, and instead of having this bigger, more complex building, we're proposing two simpler buildings, but at 4 stories. I know, whether it's 3 stories or 4 stories, there's a lot of discussion on that in the past with past projects in the town. And the reasons why we wanted 4 stories, there's several of them. For starters, everything I just stated in terms of buffers and separation and green space is a direct result of going to 4 stories and having a smaller building footprint and being able to achieve more density there and not having to have more townhomes. If these were 3 stories, we'd end up with more townhomes down here, townhomes back out front of Publishers. And, we just think it makes a lot more sense. We did design the site so it does have 360-degree access by code. 4 stories is certainly not unique to the area. As you all know, the hotel that's right on Hard Road over here on the east side is also a 4-story building. And it's also a better living environment we found for our future residents. Again, I just want to reiterate, this continues to be a senior project. We're not changing the market and trying to go to a family project or anything like that. As a matter of fact, we can't do that in the Office Park District, which specifically allows senior housing with a Progressive Development District, or PDD. And when you have seniors and you get these 3-story buildings or 2-story buildings that have a really large footprint, what you get is really long corridors, and to get from the central amenities or from the entrance or from the elevator to all the different units in the building, you can end up with pretty long interior travel distances. When you go with a more efficient layout like we've proposed, you cut back on those travel distances. So if you go up the elevator to the 3rd floor, 4th floor, to get to your unit, you're not going too far, and that's worked pretty well for us in the past. In terms of fire and rescue, so what's the downside of 4 stories if that's if I just explained some of the upsides, such as improving the site plan and better quality of life in many ways for the residents? Well, the first consideration is line of sight. Or if you're a 4-story building, who is that going to impact? That's why we went through the effort of the line of sight study to essentially show that, these 2 buildings are so far set back from Publishers Parkway, over 700 feet, same thing even farther off Hard Road. Whether it's 3 stories or 4 stories, the end result's essentially the same, as you're not really going to be able to see them because the parcel is so big. Because of the geometry of the parcel, it's kind of like a giant L, and it's really tucked into the corner of that L. Certainly by us maintaining more green space and really more trees and growth along 104, you're not going to be able to see them from 104. Based on a line of sight and tree heights, whether it's 2 stories, 5 stories, 6 stories, it has more to do with building placement and how many trees you are preserving. So, based on our study, we don't feel that, going from 3, which was previously approved, to 4 is going to have any kind of significant visual impact. The second concern could be a life safety or a firefighting concern. And certainly, as I mentioned earlier, we've provided all the access to fire apparatus roads, everything that's required by code in order to meet that. I do want to spell out specifically that this town board, under the PDD, does have the authority to approve a 4-story building as long as that it deems that it's appropriate based on the context of the development. So we're not necessarily asking for any variances, but as part of the PDD review process, we're asking this board to consider the 4 stories as a, in our opinion, a more beneficial alternative to a 2 or 3-story solution, which again would expand that development footprint, would be less green space, less screening, so on and so forth. But just to get back to the original plan, again, our density is not over the top. We're well below 8 units per acre. The reason I use the 8 units per acre number is because that's the maximum allowable density that the town has in their multifamily districts. Now, again, this is not a multifamily district, but just to use that as a reference point, the town board is also authorized under the PDT to approve densities in excess of that. But again, we're not asking for more than 8 units per acre. We're essentially asking for the same amount of density on the remaining 25 acres as was previously approved, just in a much more dense and clustered environment. Some of the other comments that the planning board had was concerns with sewer capacity and also traffic. So we have provided the sewer calculations, we have provided traffic study for review, and all those documentations back to this board for their consideration. Again, if this board were to move forward, we're still very, very early in the process, even though I think it was probably back in January or February when I was last here. But moving forward, this project would still be subject to a public hearing. It would still have to go to the planning board for site plan review. There's many steps after this. But most importantly, we wanted to present this board our changes, just reiterate that it continues to be senior housing, address the concerns that were brought up to the planning board when we went and visited those folks, and also, present the market study that was provided, because there was some concern, I think, I don't want to speak for this board, but I believe the planning board had some concerns about the market and the number of units. Carl can speak to it more detail if you would like, but essentially the market study, as any market study does, looks at comps, comparable properties, vacancy rates, and the like across the town, and including all those developments that I mentioned earlier. So that's where we currently stand. We've most of this stuff is on file. If you don't have anything, if you have any questions, if none of this is making sense, of course we're here to answer that. Again, we can speak in more detail to the market study. I believe that the way we actually appeared on the agenda would have specific reference to that.
And Jess, I gotta tell you, that might be my fault for how it was worded. To be honest with you, I did think you were presenting a study of where we're at in the town of Webster as far as senior projects. As I look back through my notes, actually, to be fair to everybody, and so as the board asks any questions on this, Tony Kishani from the planning board sent a letter to the town board on June 2nd saying that from you guys having been at the planning board, he really wanted to, and he and his board wanted to see a study of where are we at in the town of Webster on senior housing projects. Because as you referenced earlier, back in 2013, when you got approved on the original plan, there were a couple of other projects going on at the same time. Well, now they've been built and this and that, and it is something I think even the town board wants to know, how many of these units and projects are operating in the town, and where do we go, forward on these? I then met with Matt Chatfield, who was the executive director of WIDA, to get his insights on, where could we get this study and not spend an arm and a leg for it. So, and I think at our August 13th town board workshop, the board talked about this, and they had said, yeah, go and see Matt. Let's see if we can get a study done on this. I have not followed up with Matt since early September on if he's made any progress on that study. He's been somewhat immersed and ready, and also on some other grants that we've been going for in the last month and a half. It was not, in my mind, tasked to you and Carl to do your own study, but am I hearing that you did do your own study?
Yeah, we did a study which this board should have on file, but from the looks of the audience, I feel as though
I don't think...
This all came through this afternoon at 4 o'clock.
Oh, I'm sorry, I know we...
Well,
The note that we got that showed all the
Let me,
traffic study, the study, all that came through at 4 o'clock today.
okay.
I have not had the time to look at it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we submitted, we did do one, and it was submitted as part of his package.
I didn't get it until late this afternoon. I have not had time to look at it.
Yeah, I got mine about 4 o'clock too.
And, you know, because you haven't had a chance to see it, I understand that. What the market study does show is, since those projects have been built, the market is absorbing. The
What?
vacancy rates are so low enough that a project like this can easily be constructed and supported. You know, we don't take a $40 billion mortgage, like, we're gonna go out and get a $40 billion mortgage. We have to do this in the bank before we can pay the mortgage. You know what I mean? And what it shows is, there's, in Webster, the type of people in our range who are 45, turning 55 and beyond is about 45% of the population. What we found in towns where we do projects like this is people, in this project, there's a couple different products, there's townhouses and apartments. The idea is that you might move into a townhouse first, and later on you might move into an apartment. As you downsize once, then you downsize again, but you don't have to leave your neighborhood. We find that people want to move out of their house, but they don't have quality alternatives. By providing a townhouse and an apartment, they can do that. What it does is it opens up a house for a family. And we found that when we do this, like we've done 2 projects in Webster, and both filled right up. We've done a project, we just did a project in Perrington a couple of years, filled right up. And what they did is they opened up 150 houses. There were people who were leaving houses. They opened up 150 houses for families. So what it does is these types of projects, even though everybody thinks, oh, there's too many, the population is aging. It's harder and harder to build single-family home subdivisions. We all know that. Because the costs are high, the cost of site development's high, the cost of building materials high. Denser housing is going to be the trend. And I know people don't like to see 4 stories because of our community and everything else, but what Jess said about the quality of living is exactly that. When you build these sprawling complexes, and someone's got to go down this long hallway, it's just harder for them. There's a break point, and a 4-story is a nice sized building. Not 5, not 6, not 7, but 4 stories is a nice size. And it just is, and this development kind of lends itself to that. I mean,
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think that the board's consideration in all this wasn't so much about what today, about 15 years from today.
yeah, this market study shows that too.
What's going to happen in 15 years is our population changes from 45% of 45 to 55 and over to somewhat younger. What's going to happen then?
Well, I can tell you that the trend is not that. You know,
Am I right, guys?
Yes, that was one of our concerns.
Yeah.
I think it's nice to think that that's going to happen, but that's not the trend. The population is getting older in the Northeast, not younger.
I can, this is a little bit more form over function on what I'm going to say right now. This is a workshop.
Yeah.
These are nice and, I enjoy workshops a lot more than formal.
Yeah, and we
I feel
get
like the pressure's off the board, we can have free-flowing conversation. We've been trying to structure the formal board meetings where the board gets digital supporting documentation of resolutions they'll be voting on that night, days in advance. Workshops, usually Kim in my office will, if there's something we have that's a visual, such as your market study, which we had back on October 14th. I can see now that you sent it over, Josh, you got it, you sent it to Kim in my office. Kim went to print it out today to give to all of us so we'd have it.
It's too long.
It's too big. So that's okay. I mean, it's not your, the reality, and this is form over function. We had your market study, and thank you, all right? I would assume the board at their leisure will go and look at it and have questions. Jess, obviously you brought this. I don't think we had that, but maybe that's in the digital stuff you sent over on October 14th also. And you chose tonight to hand out this to the board, but not hand out the market study. And that's fine.
Yeah, sure.
We're not voting on anything tonight.
Right, no, we know that. We know that.
So the beauty is that at least, this helped me tremendously kind of show the lineage from 2013 up through today, and I can see, I give you credit, you've tried to make attempts on buffering and site views and all that stuff, and that's good. The market study, and I promise you this, and Tony Kashani's letter to us on June 2nd, where it spawned off of a planning board meeting on your project, it truly was more global from a standpoint, hey, town board, we got to take a look at this. We've now built in the last 5 years all these senior developments. Do we need more of them? For the question you asked, Billy, and stuff like that. So we're in a kind of a discernment phase. It isn't so much about the specificity of this project on Publishers Parkway and Howard, but just over the next couple of years as we get hit with any proposals on more senior projects.
Sure.
So,
Well, leave it at this, right? So it's somewhat moot to talk about roads and trees until you know whether there's a real demand or not. And I think there could be a lot of differencing of opinions, and without everybody having had the opportunity to review whether it's this study or if you determine that this study doesn't contain the information that you're looking for, your own
thank you. And
independent
that's, I
study.
need to ask Matt,
Yeah,
where is he at? The board needs to look at your study, and I appreciate, and I also would like to have him look at Matt's, because I'm sure, Matt's is more independent, both in perception and reality, than a study that was done by the engineering firm for the developer who's trying to put the, I'm just being honest.
It really isn't
Okay.
more independent, because again, I can't go to a mortgage company and fool them with information. They're gonna vet it. So what's gonna happen is this is statistical information that anybody can get. And it's only put into a form, so when you get the information from somebody else, it should mirror this information.
And you know what?
It should.
That's what I hope it does.
It should.
All right,
This
but I mean,
is it's not put in a marketing thing to say, hey, sell this. It's because, again, we don't want to build something that fails. When we did the last 3 projects, we did them because it said they were going to do what they did, and they did, to the point where they have waiting lists.
In Carl, look,
No,
I mean, and I can just say this, and I mean, these are seasoned veterans on the town board, and they're teaching me the ifs and thens and action, reaction. The reality is this, all right? The good news is, we're not ready to vote on anything tonight about, a PDD with a variance of a 4-story. We're getting closer, the information that you gave here, the information that you gave in the marketing study, if we can get the corroborating from Matt's study, because the reality is the community is watching how we do these things, and we would be under scrutiny for accepting without any corroboration.
Absolutely.
The marketing, the study that was done by
The developer.
the developer.
Yeah, we want you to do it.
I mean,
We want you to do it.
I'm a simple guy. That's like the hen coming to me and saying, "Hey, we got no problems with us going into the chicken coop."
Yeah, no, I know that
No, it's there.
yeah.
Fox. Thank you.
We know that, the perception is that all developers are bad. Wait, there's nothing we can do. It's not in the town board's mind.
That is not what I
It's not
said.
in the town board's
No,
mind. I'm
no.
not talking about your mind, it's
No.
just community mind, because that's the way it is. It just tends to be that way.
Yep. Separation of duties.
Yeah.
Separation of duties. I'm an auditor by trade.
Yeah, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about
Yeah.
community-wise, that's the way it's perceived. Because somebody builds a plaza behind their house, and again, I live in town, and I live right behind, my kids went to Webster schools, and Baytown built right against my house. It was their right,
Yep.
so be it.
What I'd like to do, and because I don't want to, one thing we're trying to do, I don't want to drag you guys on forever, okay? At some point, I think the next tangible event is you're looking for this board to rule on, trying to write the
I was
variance.
gonna say, there is no PDD at this point, correct?
Correct.
correct. The PDD, it was extended several times, I believe, a lot of times. But I don't believe there exists today. I think that went away when the U of R went in there and built their medical building.
So we're gonna need a PDD, you're gonna need a variance for the stories.
Well, not a variance from the zoning board, because the town board has the authority to.
No, I mean, within the PDD, it's still a
Yeah,
variance,
so,
but it's.
I'm sorry, when I need a variance, I automatically think.
Yes, I'm sorry, within the PDD. You're
Right,
gonna
need
need
a
it.
deviation to the dimensional standard, which the board has.
And I think we need a special permit as well, because this is,
But you just said there is no PDD.
no, but within, if we grant the
Got
PDD,
it, okay.
if we impose the PDD.
Got it.
Then we can do that as part of the PDD district, but we still have to also issue a special use permit as well.
Correct, all those things, that was a yes.
Yeah, so there'll be a public hearing by this board as well as a
Right.
public hearing before, so there'll be multiple public hearings.
Okay, but the board has not got a chance to look at the.
No, it's premature at this point.
And-
Yeah, we want you to vet this study, we want you to.
This is just a presentation.
Yes, okay.
I find the tapestry life mode map fascinating.
Pardon me?
I find the tapestry life mode map fascinating in this, on how things are separated out into what is senior areas and affluent estates and upscale avenues. It's just interesting.
Yeah, and again, this was done because we said there's more to, there's a lot of, there's no question, we agree that there are a lot of apartments. We agree.
Right.
And we wanted to see if it was the right product.
Carl, Jess, Matt, I mean, we're gonna have to end this session on this now. But I do I wanna make sure I understand from Charlie exactly what would have to ultimately be voted on if they're mutually three exclusive things, the PDD, the variance, the special, or if it's all in one, we can get that view. And whether the board needs another workshop with you guys. I don't want to drag this out. But remember, this isn't all about your project. The board is looking at this globally from a standpoint of senior housing. So you unfortunately are going to be the guinea pigs of what we're looking for any future senior housing in the foreseeable next few years.
While the board's
Based on
doing
these
that,
studies.
While the board's doing that, this is just a general question from someone who's gonna do multifamily housing in this town, maybe, and in other towns. Will the board be looking at other types of
Multifamily housing.
multifamily?
It's funny you say that because my notes with Matt said, not you, Matt. Matt Chatfield said, look, I'd probably, for the same amount of money or a few bucks more in my study, give you the whole kit and caboodle of an analysis of everything in Webster, which I think is what you're asking.
Yeah, because, and the only reason I'm asking it is because what I'm thinking I'm gonna see, because costs are so high, and young people are having such a hard time obtaining a house, is that townhomes for family living or like we're building townhomes that you would see in other markets for family living,
Yeah.
is something that there's a need. Now, whether or not this community wants to brace or not, I don't know. I was just wondering if that was something you'd be looking at, because to build single-family homes is hard and expensive, and young people can't get in them. They just can't. They're $400,000 to build a house.
Even if they're $200,000.
What?
Even if they're 200.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, they're $400,000.
Oh, they're not staying on the market very long in Webster, I'll tell you that right now.
Pardon me?
They're not, houses that go up for
Webster,
sale.
Penfield,
they're not staying
Barrington,
on
one
the
day,
market.
and it's
They're going in days.
$50,000 more than the asking price.
Yep.
So that's why I was wondering.
Yeah, no, and I think we're saying the same thing. Matt is gonna try to get a, comprehensive, and I use that term that's not that coy, because we are looking, the comprehensive plan for the town is 12 years old, so eventually we're gonna have to be looking at that in the future to update it. And all this data is very important, because if you're gonna put together a comprehensive plan, you're looking at usually the next 10 to 20 years.
Right, and that's what our question was to begin with, and to substantiate Barry's comment, we know that we hope that if this were to be built, you'd fill it up, and I trust that you have, that you going to the mortgage company would say, yeah, you'll sell them all and you'll fill them up. But our thought is, what does it look like in 20 years?
Right.
And it's a-
Will there still be seniors to fill that? Or will they all decide to move south, or will they be moving other places? Our concern more is for the real long-term on these, because we have a number of senior facilities in town, and how many of those will be supported in 20 years? I know no one has a crystal ball, but
Yeah, and that's why we tried to build a product that had some versatility, the townhome being one of them. And, you know, its proximity to various services like schools or other things, recreation facilities, you're not pigeonholed into one product.
Right. Guys,
Thanks.
I gotta stop now, and I'll probably coordinate with you, Jess, that I don't wanna drag you guys out.
Yeah, you guys have a little homework to do, and then gotta get back to work.
Yeah, and have a reasonable assumption of what the next steps are that culminate with whether Charlie tells us that it's one voting thing with a PDD that encompasses all the other things, or if they are 3 or 4 mutually exclusive items. Because that will make a difference. So, thanks.
Thanks.
All right, and
Wait for your communication.
mea culpa. Had I known and thought about this earlier, I would have gotten with Kim and said, get this out to the board.